Yes, welcome everybody back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. It's always a joy to be with the rabbis and hear the truth of Torah. And, you know, this week I had a lot of stress, but I even had a lot of people ask, well, you know, why do I do this? And you know, aside from trying to understand the Torah more, the biggest thing for me is to just be closer to the people of God. And it's just a joy to be with Rabbi Coffman. So, you know, let's just jump in. I think we're starting on chapter 2, Mishnah 5 today, Rabbi Coffman, and you're live on the air, sir.
That's where we're holding chapter 2, Mishnah 5. I also second as a psychotherapist. So anytime, you know, you have any issues, you know, I'm definitely here to either make it worse or maybe a little bit
at least make me laugh.
You know, put it in perspective, because we are definitely living, you know, in absolutely crazy times, you know, where God forbid, you know, you say something, you get censored, you know, which is ironic because, you know, all the crazy people in the world, you know, in Iran, in Somalia, you know, they're allowed to say what they want. You know, other people that, we just don't like this person, we're going to censor him. Right. So it's, you know, it's kind of ironic, but of course we're not going to speak about politics. Right. So we are in, because we've got a lot to speak about today, and I don't think we're going to cover half of it, but there's a lot in this Mishnah. We are in chapter 2, Mishnah 5. I'll just read through it and then we'll start at the beginning. Said Hillel said, don't separate yourself from the community. Right? That's probably going to be the topic for today. Maybe even next week. We'll see. Do not believe in yourself until the day you die. Do not judge your fellow until you have reached his place. These are huge topics. Huge topics over here. Do not make a statement that cannot be easily understood on the ground that'll be understood eventually. Don't say, you know what? You know, I'll say something. They'll figure it out. Right? They'll figure it out later. No. And don't say, when I am free, I will study. Why? Because perhaps you're not going to be free. Right? You're not going to have time. So each one of these, I don't know. We'll see how much time we're going to spend on each one. Right? But there's a ton here. So the first thing is, says Hillel, what does it mean? Do not separate yourself from the community. Now, we all know, well, if you don't know, you'll know now, and that is that the Rambam, in the laws of repentance, the Rambam says there are 24 things that stop a person from repentance. One of them is separating yourself from the community. You have to be part of the community. When it comes to converts, right, it doesn't necessarily apply to Noahides, but should apply to Noahides also, living in a community amongst same-minded people, which Noahides spread out, you know, all over the world, which, you know, you very well know, you know, and I also know. But I get this question a lot from potential converts, and, you know, that is, well, it doesn't say anywhere in the Talmud, doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, doesn't say anywhere in the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch, that a Jew has to be part of a community, right? Where does it say a non-Jew has to be part of a Jewish community? Right? Don't think this question doesn't come up. Right? Now remember, the Noahide laws I mentioned 100 times, probably 1,000 times, they're all things that Noahides, non-Jews have to keep because they make sense logically according to the Torah. So over here, how can a person say, well, you know what? Doesn't say anywhere that I have to be part of a community. Well, let me ask you the $1 million question, stupid. How are you going to become a Jew if you don't live amongst Jews? That's a pretty simple question, right? Doesn't matter. You can't find a job in the community. You know, you can't move. You want to be part of it. You want to be part of the community. We're going to speak about the benefits, you know, of that. But you have to live within walking distance, right? What's within walking distance? A mile, maybe a couple miles, you know, whatever it is. But it could be 400 or 500 years ago, certainly in the time, you know, the rabbis of the Talmud more than 2,000 years ago. If a person wanted to be part of a Jewish community, you hang out with Jews, you learn by osmosis. Right? You could have said that 400 years ago, 500 years ago. You cannot say that today. Right? 100% you cannot say that today. So that would be pretty obvious. If I want to be a Jew, I have to live amongst Jews. I would say by Noahide, you want to be a Noahide? You can certainly be, even without being necessarily in striking distance of a Jewish community. But at the end of the day, you want to hang out with Jews because you want to know what to do. I've been getting shellacked a little bit, by saying why is it our job? Now, I can't imagine I said anything controversial or that would actually tick people off. I'm sure no one can imagine, right? But, I get this a lot, which I spoke about last week, on Tonight Talk, is that's not our job, right? I'm going to repeat this once. I'm going to repeat it again. It's not our job to find non-Jews, right? I mentioned what my Rabbi says, mentioned a whole bunch of things. We're not looking to teach non-Jews what it means to be a non-Jew. They are going to come to us in the Messianic era. They're going to come to us. They're going to say, wow, what do you live in, a censored internet? You live in China? You live in Iran? Of course you can find out information. It's not easy. Go to Google, even, hopefully you're not going to get censored by Google. Put in Jews, non-Jews, wanting to be Jews or how to be a non-Jew according to Judaism. It will come up, right? You have to know how to use a search engine, right? This isn't nuclear physics, right? So now you expect me or anybody else. We're out there looking to teach non-Jews about what they have to keep. They're coming to us. We don't have an obligation. Maybe a total waste of time when I could have been learning Torah, right? But if it's something they'll never know, they'll never figure out, that I can hear, obviously you need someone to teach them, right? For sure you need someone to teach them. But a lot of this are no-brainers. That's why a non-Jew, and again, I'll say it for the 100th time, a non-Jew is liable if they don't keep the Noahide laws because they're obvious. A non-Jew's not going to get upstairs and God's going to say, how come you didn't keep this? He said, what do you mean? How was I supposed to know that? God says, you don't know you're not allowed to cheat on your taxes. You're not allowed, you're not allowed to put your hand in the cookie jar. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to commit adultery. Oh, that's just the good advice. What do you mean it's good advice? It's obvious, right? There are things that are obvious. God's not going to zap a non-Jew for something that's not obvious, right? So now, if it's something you come out of Christianity, you should take my course, right? Discover your biblical path. Teach you what it means to be a non-Jew. Teach you what it means to be a Jew, right? How to find a rabbi, how to find a community. I'm not the one making the decision. Somebody wants the information, they can find the information. But who in their right mind says I have to go to all the communities? What, I should put signs up? I should put signs up at all the churches. Anyone who wants to leave the church, you want to be a Noahide? Here's my number. I'll give you Dan's number. He got plenty of problems. We'll add him to him more. Give him more headaches because he can't fit into a machine. Check out his head, right? I digress here. The point is, imagine if I had coffee, you'd all be dead, right? But the point is that what we should be doing? Should Jews out there be advertising? I should put flyers, right? What someone's telling me. You have to be out there doing that. What, I should get on my soapbox? I should get on my soapbox in England and start saying, all non-Jews got to keep the Noahide law. Why is that my job? Why is that my job? Someone comes out of Christianity miraculously. You want to find out what it means to a Jew. There are ample ways to do it. And if you come to a Jew, he's got an obligation to help you. If he can, right? 1 second. But why, again, if we're supposed to be a light unto nations, which we are, who says I'm allowed to proselytize? We're not interested in converts. Converts giving us a bad name throughout the millennium, right? So you say, okay, but what about non-Jews? Where in the world is it my obligation, right? Where is it my obligation? I have to be in every nook and cranny, right, out there in the world to help non-Jews according to their mitzvahs. It's not brought down in the Torah. Not brought down in the Talmud, not brought down in the early commentaries, not brought down in the later commentaries. So I asked the $1 million question: if it's something that's obvious and you don't want to transgress, the 615th commandment of Coffman's commandments, don't be a moron. Why is it? No offense. Why is it my job? Why is it my job if it's something that's obvious? Right now, if a person's confused, and they have questions, which I'm sure many people do, if you're really searching, Talmud says if you're really searching and you want to go in the right path, God will help you. If you want to go in the wrong path, God will not stop you. So therefore, if a person makes this decision and they pray and they say, God, I want to go in the right direction, put me in the right direction, boom, there you go, Pirkei Avos, right there, right? You'll see a post, you'll see something, everybody's on the internet, anyone can get the information, right? Now, you don't know how to use a search engine? Learn, right? These are things that are obvious. God is not going to zap you if it's something that's obvious, right? But, a lot of things that come my way, and you think you got problems, a lot of things that come my way, people ask sometimes, I'm not going to say they're offensive. They're not offensive, but everybody wants an answer and they want the answer like this, right? Like they expect I got nothing better to do but answer everyone's emails. I mean, I do that, right? I certainly do that, right? But God gave you a brain also, right? He gave you a brain to think, right? Most people don't want to think. Most people just say, okay, what's the answer? You're a rabbi, give me the answer, right? But there are certain things, I'm not saying all of them, there are certain things that are obvious. They're absolutely obvious, right? You can find the answer yourself. You don't need me for that, right? But again, I'm not going to turn people away. I will answer, but I want people to use their heads also, right? The brain's not just something you sit on, right? It's something that you should use, right? 100%. God gave you a brain. Why, my job in general, certainly when it comes to conversion, is to spoon feed people. Why do I spoon feed? Because I want to make sure people get all the information. I want to make sure they understand it clearly. I'm not going to leave it up to chance, right? I'll send them information. I'll spoon feed them, but I want to make sure they get the right information, right? By no eyes, a lot of the information is there, right? You need someone to guide you, that's for sure, right? And there are many, many things that are obvious, but for goodness sakes, think. You got to think before you ask the question. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate question, right? There are many legitimate questions, out there. You type in a few words, you're going to find the answer like that, right? I'm not saying everything is like that. There are a lot of in-between cases. Yeah, question.
Well, yeah, Rabbi, more a statement that might lead to more discussion of what you've been talking about. Like you say, the Hebrew people, the rabbis aren't out there proselytizing, but I have found that life dictates to us, especially those that don't know, the successes and the hardships of life, seem to buffet us in such a fashion that if we're not asking the questions or recognizing the scenario we're in, we get more and more lost. It gets worse and worse. But if you start asking the right questions, starting to seek, again, things change.
God gave people common sense. There are certain things that are absolute common sense. There are other things, okay, I understand. They're more convoluted. They're more difficult. There are more details. Yes. I'm talking about things that are black and white, right? I'm not, sometimes I see questions. I'm like, why are you asking? Like, why, this is something that's obvious, right? Well, and then I think about, well, maybe it's not so obvious, right? Maybe there are other factors involved, maybe, but sometimes I just come to the conclusion and say, like, okay, I'll give you the answer, but I had somebody for a while, just bombarding with questions, this and that. And I'm like, why don't you just look it up? Part of the educational process is using your brain and looking it up, right? Oh, why should I look it up? I have you. And there were many times I can tell you when I was learning, I was stuck on something. And if I was going in the wrong direction, rabbis would point me in the right direction.
Right.
If I was going in the right direction, they'd say, you got a brain.
You were spending time on it, though, looking.
It depends. It depends how much time you're going to waste on it, and other things. But again, if you have a brain in your head, right, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? Like anything else, you're going to work at it, right? And, I became who I am because I wasn't handed anything, right? I had to struggle like everybody else. Sometimes I got helped in other ways, but, when it was something using, if you're going in the right direction, I wasn't, going to be handed something on a platter. Say, oh, go look at this or go look at that. Or, if I was in the wrong direction, that's something else. Then you're barking up the wrong tree. Then it's a waste of time, right? So you need to be in the right direction, but, why? I understand people don't want to waste time.
No.
I also understand people are lazy, right? And being lazy, there's no point in being lazy in Judaism. The more you work at it, the more merit you get, even if you come to the wrong conclusion. Even if absolutely you come to the wrong conclusion.
Well, the deeper
right?
the lesson.
So it's all about work. I think we mentioned last week this idea, Lafit Sar Agra, that according to the amount of effort you put in, right, is the amount of merit you're going to get. So if someone two people put in, a certain amount of effort, one person put in a ton of effort, worked on it for hours, comes to the wrong conclusion, right? Someone else works for 20 minutes, half an hour, and he gets the right answer. Who gets more merit? The one who got the wrong answer. Why? Because he put in more effort. He put in a heck of a lot more effort. The person who didn't have to use his brain so much came up with the right answer. Okay, right? He didn't have to work that hard. He'll get merit. He'll get reward. You're not going to get rewarded if you worked on it for 2 hours, right? So here, okay, so now back to our original question. That was just an introduction,
that's hopeful.
Right? Yeah. Back to our, so, even before we get to, this idea about the community, people are bothered by the fact, as we mentioned, that, the Jews should be out there. And we should be able, they should be able to come to us. Why is that? Right? Take a look at, the Christians. That's what they do. They proselytize all over the place. So we'll give information. You can make a choice however you want, right? But why is that our obligation? Certainly in the Messianic era, it's brought down that non-Jews are going to come to the Jews, not the other way around, right? Certainly not the other way around. But the question is, well, if you're a light into nations, yeah, we're a light into nations. What does that have to do with me going out there and teaching the non-Jews of the world? Right, and bringing them closer to their mitzvah. Why is that my obligation? So someone will say, whose obligation is it? Right? Of course it falls on the Jews. Right? But again, if it's not brought down that I have an obligation, why would I think I have an obligation? Right? So you want to be part of it. What would the first thing you would do? You come out of Christianity. You want to find out what it means to be a Noahide. What would be the first thing you would do? Contact a Jewish community. And then they'll say, we don't deal with non-Jews. They'll say, we don't deal with non-Jews. Right? Then you got to do more. Then you got to do more research. Right? That's what's going to happen, most likely. They'll tell you, well, if you want to know about Judaism, convert. Right? Okay, we're not even going to go down that path. But that's the first thing. They'll tell you, find a Jewish community, contact them. Right? That's what you do. So if you live in the middle of nowhere, put in Jewish community, go to Rabbi Dr. Google, put in Jewish community of that place and see what comes up. I have to go out to find you. Come on. Use your head. Look into things and then see, and then see what you come up with. Eventually, if you're going in the right path, God's going to put you in the right direction. Right? But everybody wants everything for free. They want everything to be done for them, and people are, with a capital L, lazy. They're lazy. Go look it up. What do you need me for? Right? Go look it up. You come to me afterwards, one thing. I have to go out and search for you, in Timbuktu? I don't think so. I have to go look for you in the prairies, watching CFL? I don't think so. Right? That's not my job. It's not my job to make fun of it. What does it mean now to separate yourself from the community? First thing is that a person, if you're not part of the community, right, you want to be able to share in the suffering of the community. Meaning, there's a lot of suffering going on in the Jewish community today with anti-Semitism, people dying from this virus, all kinds of issues that are going on. So if you separate yourself from the community, you don't share in the good of the community. You don't share in the suffering of the community. Right? You separate from the community, you don't also get the consolation. Right? If you have an obligation, if a Jew has an obligation to mourn, right? Somebody that died, mother, father, sister, brother, God forbid, a child or a spouse. So if you're not part of the community, who's going to console you? The priest will, because they want to save your soul. right? But who's going to console you? Nobody, right? In other words, this is a give and take. You help share the suffering of the community. They will console you when you need it, or they will enjoy as part of your enjoyment, right? So that means if they don't share in the sorrows and the tragedies and the difficulties people in the community go through, they themselves, measure for measure, will not be comforted in their time of need. In other words, when you need them, ain't anybody going to be home, right? They're not even going to know because you're not part of the community. So therefore, you have to help others, right? You have to feel the pain of what others go through, and you feel the pain for them as long as you're not totally obnoxious, and whatever, they will feel your pain, right? They will help you along,
Wow.
and they will comfort. I can tell you, and this is a major thing that Noahides don't have, right? And this is something, obviously trying to work on, and that is there are no set communities. There are some.
We're trying.
Right? There are some, but they're all over the place. That people are scattered all over. But a virtual community, I think, is certainly better than nothing. And people like that certainly need help. They need guidance. And what do they do when they're in trouble? In Judaism, it's very easy. You have the community, right? You have different people in the community that, will step up, so to speak. So if you didn't have that, people go out of their minds. They're alone, right? I'm not saying it's easy even with people comforting you. When it comes to tragedy, people really, some people really want to be alone. They just want to try and internalize it. They don't want other people around. That's why if you go into a mourner's house, if they're sitting on the floor, you don't engage them in conversation until they speak.
Right.
Right. That's the halacha. You're not allowed to engage them. Right. They have to speak, and then you can engage. Right. Because the reality is maybe they don't want to speak. Maybe the best thing is just being silent. You don't want to, certainly you don't want to say things, that are gonna make the person feel, uneasy. Right. You don't want to make comments that are going to affect them in a negative way, so to speak. So you have to be careful what you say, no question. And you have to wait for them to speak, right? You don't just start up a conversation. You don't just say, hey, how you doing? What do you mean? I'm on the floor. What does it look like I'm doing? I'm in mourning, right? There's proper etiquette, right? Certainly proper etiquette. But again, in some ways, some people will say, I'd rather be alone. I don't want people coming to me. On the other hand, you help share the burden, right? In other words, a person does feel comforted by knowing they're not alone, by knowing there are people, even if they're not close friends, doesn't really matter. They know that they're not alone. They know that, people are there to help. Their help to make up a quorum, to make up a minyan, to bring over food, whatever, take your kids out, whatever it is, there's a whole infrastructure. There's a whole infrastructure set up. But if you're not part of a community, you don't get any of it. You're stuck there by yourself. And that's one of the harder things, certainly during this time, where you can't have too many people over, right? God forbid, some people died by themselves, right? No one else could be there. And the people mourn by themselves, right? They just could have people over, right? At the time where they weren't allowing anybody to come, when there was total lockdown. So you didn't have that benefit. Not only that, you need to pray, right? Guys need to say Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, 3 times a day. Couldn't do that, right? Even, then they had these backyard, services, people in, different backyards, or here they have different porches, they had it, etc. It's still not the same, right? But imagine you're going through this mourning process seemingly alone because people can't be there, right? Now,
We've seen a lot of that.
That's what a person
lately.
needs. A person needs the comfort, the consolation. If you don't have the consolation, you feel very much alone. A person in general may feel alone anyway, but if they have consolation of the community, it's a whole different ballgame, right? You feel something totally different. People care. People are there for you if you want to speak to people, whatever, whatever it is. But if you're separate from that, you don't have it, right? And if you don't have it, it's something that is seriously missing, that people definitely, definitely need, and my father died more than 6 years ago. So someone had asked me, a relative, that asked me, how could you have people every single day? I said, well, I didn't have them every day. I said, except on Shabbos, people didn't come. So I said, well, you had 400 people in one shot. That you only sat for 2 days, right? I sat for 7, but it was interspersed. You have 10 people come, some people leave, some people come, some people leave, they come, whatever it is that went on for 6 days, right? During the day, during the night, it's exhausting. It is tremendously exhausting. But I would think if you have everybody in one shot over 2 days, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane. You can have 500 people, or more relatives, friends that keep coming, more food, this, that, and they're coming in a day and a half. You know what that is? Can't even imagine what that is, right? I had enough people coming as it was, friends from far away, friends from close, people call me on the phone, that's comforting. It's exhausting. I don't think there's any question, right? But imagine if you tried to do it one shot. Imagine you have 400 people one day, 300 people the next day. You're dead. It's just, you're seeing so many people. The thing flashes right before your eyes. You don't have any closure, really. It's a very hard thing, right? So the first thing here is, if you don't have that connection to community, first of all, you don't suffer with people. You don't have the goodness. You don't get to share in the good things as well. But when you're in time of need, either way, whether it's something good or, God forbid, something bad, you have nobody. You have nobody to share it with. Maybe you share it with family, okay? Right? So you have a few people here, there, whatever it is, however big a person's family is, but you don't have any friends. You don't have the community, right? That's one of the harder things when we make a wedding, right? A child gets married, so most people have big weddings, right? Normally here you have 200 people, 300 people, more people come in and out. Not everyone stays for the meals, it stays for the meal, etc. But you have a lot of people, right? So imagine now you have much smaller groups because that's all you can do, right? So in a different way, it's more informal, right? Definitely more informal. You have less people. It's not, it's not the same. Some people say it's better because it cuts down on the expense, cuts down on people, but you don't get a chance to share it with your friends. With community, you can only have 10 people, 20 people, 30 people maximum. Yeah, question.
Yeah, on that point, if I think back to prophets like Elijah, the prophet, who went through some deep alone time. It seemed, he thought that, the whole world was out to get him, and there was no one left but him. And, some of us, especially B'nai Noach, we feel that way, left out, like peppered throughout the world, salted all over the place, but don't have that possibility. But I also have one other question off of Facebook from somebody else back earlier when you were talking about it's not the Jewish nation's response or obligation, but she asks, so what does it mean to be a light to the nations? Is it only during the Messianic era? If you have a moment, I don't mean to go back so far.
No, it's not. It's not just for the Messianic era. In other words, if the Jews do what they're supposed to do, meaning if you see Jews, in the supermarket, in a bank, you see them with their kids, let's say, and they're acting in a proper way. That's what it means to be a light into the nations, right? We're also going to be the ones out there, talking about morality, right? Talking about all kinds of other things.
Ethics.
It has nothing to do with the Messianic. It has nothing to do with the Messianic era. But if non-Jews want to see it, it's very easy to see if they want to see it. Problem is, you know what they say? You want to sell a newspaper. If you say dog bites man, it's not really going to get headlines. If you say man bites dog, right, that's headlines. Why? So why do I mention that? Because when Jews, especially Orthodox Jews, do things wrong, and we're our own worst enemy. Plenty of things we can do wrong. God forbid, plenty of things. We've seen Orthodox Jews go to jail. Right? So you have to condemn the action, not the person, obviously. But in the end, if we do the wrong thing, that makes news. That is news. I was in contact with someone. I've been in contact for many, many years. And, they basically know I'm an Orthodox Jew. And one of the things was that they mentioned, do you ever read this book? Right? They ever read this book? It's about somebody Hasidic who went off and basically lambasted the Jewish community, right, for whatever reason. And it's about an Orthodox Jew who went sour, right? Because I didn't know what the book was, I looked it up. So again, someone has a grievance, against the Orthodox community. I'm sure there are plenty out there, unfortunately. So they said, "Did you ever read the book?" And I said, "No." And I said, I don't really need to read it because I know what people are going to say. Right? I know what the argument's going to be, more or less. What they went through, the difficulties. I said, I don't have an issue. That's not going to be my issue. That's not going to turn me around and say, oh, you know what? It must be Judaism. Oh, it's corrupt. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. Right? So it must be. Why should I be an Orthodox Jew? But I mentioned to someone once before, I said, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, when it comes to Judaism, we are very successful 95% of the time or more, passing it down to our kids, right? So what are you looking for? You're looking for the negativity. You're looking for the wackos out there, quoting. I'm not going to call them wackos, but you're looking for people out there that have an axe to grind against the Jewish community.
Right. Totally.
So therefore, you're going to relate to them, and you're going to say, "Oh, look, see, this is a really good point. This is why I would never be an Orthodox Jew. This is why I would never do this." It's an excuse. So, I made my point, and I said, well, 95% of the time, Judaism really works. I'm not saying people don't have issues. I'm not saying there's not abuse. I'm not saying, people can't get embarrassed. I know, somebody, 15-year-old kid got embarrassed, by the head of his yeshiva, and that was it. Basically, he said, if that's what Judaism is, and you embarrass me, whether he deserved it or not, no one deserves to be embarrassed in public. But, this kid said, I'm out. I'm not going to have anything to do with Judaism. It can happen with that. It can happen with abuse. It can happen with any number of things. Why a person goes off, not really the topic for now. But the point is that, yeah, they can have an axe to grind. But you know what? At the end of the day, they have to answer. They're going to have to answer to God. I had somebody, a friend of my father's, blessed memory, that he once said, well, when I was in Cheder, when I was in a Jewish school, and the Rabbi hit me, and if that's what Judaism is, I don't have anything to do with it. So I said, but that's not what Judaism is. And the person kept saying the same thing over and over again. Right? If that's what Judaism is, I said, that was more than 70 years ago. I said, maybe Rabbi had a bad day. Maybe. Right? But the person kept saying the same thing over and over again. So I'll take from what Rabbi Wine, you should be well. Right? Great, great rabbi, great historian. Rabbi Wine said, imagine kids in 4th grade. Right? 10 years old. And he has a bad teacher. Now, let's say, granted, we'll cut him some slack. He had a bad teacher, right? The teacher did all kinds of terrible things. Everyone agrees it's a bad teacher. And this kid says, you know what? I'm done with education, right? Pink Floyd, we don't need them. Yeah, whatever, right? We don't need this education. So what does he say? I'm done. You didn't think I knew Pink Floyd. Anyway, so we don't need this education. So what does he say? I'm done. I'm going to go get a job. No one would ever do that. Nobody. Never going to happen. Right? You chalk it up to bad experience. May need psychological help. Might need to see a psychologist, whatever. You get an MRI, all that. And what happens? You get over it eventually. Hopefully it doesn't kill you in the process. Right? But you're never going to say, I'm done with it. Right? So this person used that as an excuse. They say, I had this bad experience. I had that bad experience. What does that have to do with Judaism? Right? Don't mix up Jews and Judaism. There are a lot of bad people out there. give us a bad name. You know, among them could be rabbis, no question about it, right? They could say things, they could do things, right? My job's not to answer why they said it or why they did something. The point is, it's not something where someone says, oh, look, this rabbi did this, this rabbi did, you know, someone else did something else. Oh, this guy caught for laundering money. No one's going to say that's good, right? That makes us look bad. They're going to say, oh, look, see, an Orthodox Jew did that. I had someone tell me, oh, an Orthodox Jew did that. I don't do that. I'm not so bad. So why do I have to keep the mitzvah? That's called a third and long. That is called a punt, right? That's exactly what it is. That you can't make excuses. You can say, well, this happened. I'm done. What do you mean you're done? Okay, you have to deal with it. You got to get help with it, right, etc. What do you mean? What does it mean you're done? You say, if God could do this, God, remember, in the book Chovos Levavos, duties of the heart, right? The Chovos Levavos says in the gate of Parnas, in Shar B'tachon, in the gate of having proper faith and belief in God. He said, when things happen to you, especially when it comes to livelihood, you have to remember whatever happens, someone rips you off, someone does something wrong, whatever it is, they are a vehicle. They are a messenger. They have free will. They will get punished if convicted. Right? I don't know in these courts today, but they will get convicted.
Promoted.
Nonetheless, what happens? A person says, will jump up and down, yell and scream, just like someone who's texting, goes through a red light, smashes your car. First thing you're doing, you get out of your car. Hopefully you didn't get, you yourself didn't get hurt. You're yelling and screaming at the person. Now that's the obvious reaction.
Road rage.
That's the obvious reaction. But what's the Torah reaction? The Torah reaction, which most people are not aware, because I'm going to point this out. The Torah reaction is God sending me a message. This is the messenger. You're gonna go after the guy's insurance or the woman's insurance. No question about it. You got to put your best foot forward. But you have to remember the guy is the messenger. Just like God forbid,
shoot the messenger.
You hit a dog with a stick. Not that I'm advocating. I don't want all the PETA or PETA activists jumping up and down. You hit a dog with the stick. Who does the dog go after? The stick. They don't go after the person wielding the stick. Right? Same thing. We yell and scream. Why did this person do this? Why did this person do that? They're a stick. God's using them as a stick. But you know what? Our knee-jerk reaction is, it's not fair. I didn't deserve this. Of course you deserved it one way or another, but God is just using this person as a messenger. So you're going to say, oh, if God's using him as a messenger, why does he get punished? Good question. Well, it's not really a good question, but it's a question. Why does he get punished? He gets punished because he's got free will. God didn't put a gun to his head. No one put a gun to his head to start texting, going through a red light. He did it. He was negligent. Now, is the person that is negligent, are they liable? They're liable. They're 100% liable. Doesn't matter how they grew up. Doesn't matter they came from a broken home. Nobody cares about that. They were texting, went through a red light. Right? What's our reaction going to be? We're going to scream bloody murder. We're going to get out of the car. Whatever. We're going to go absolutely ballistic. And I'm not saying we don't have a right to be angry. Right? But remember the fault. First of all, let's say you didn't get hurt. It's only your car. The car can get fixed. It's there are a lot of things to be thankful for. Even if you did get hurt, even with all that, we're still screaming bloody murder. Right? But you have to remember one thing. And the one thing is, did I get the message? Because of course I got the message. Don't text and drive. No, the message is God sending you a message. What's the message? He's hitting you in your pocket. He's hitting you in your body. He's just using the other person as a dead weight. Right? He's using him as the stick. Now, someone's going to say, does anyone really hold that way? Right? Is this how we're supposed to live our lives? Comes along the Chovos Levavos over there, and he says that's our obligation. Someone might say, oh, he's not talking to the masses. He must be talking to, the righteous. So I'll give another example. If you go to Book of Leviticus, chapter 19, right? The Torah says that you're not allowed to bear a grudge. You're not allowed to take revenge, right? It's talking to the masses. So somebody, for instance, your backyard, It's like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, if you know what I'm talking about. Right? It's like a jungle. Or if they say in Israel, it's a jungle, right? It's a jungle. You got to take your lawnmower. Who knows what's growing back there? So you ask your neighbor, can I borrow your lawnmower? And he says, no. It's like, listen, I got wild animals back there. I gotta mow the lawn. And he says, no, I can't let you I can't let you borrow it. So what happened? Okay, you figure out a different way. Guy comes back to you a week later. 2 weeks later, his lawnmower is on the mend, right? It's on the shelf, right? It's on the shelf, so to speak, needs to be fixed. He said, by the way, can you lend me your lawnmower? I see you got a nice new lawnmower. Can you lend me your lawnmower? Now, if this Jew says, I should lend you my lawnmower, said, because you didn't lend me your lawnmower, I'm not lending you mine. Nah. I'm not going to lend you my lawnmower. Comes along the Torah and says, that's a Torah prohibition of taking revenge. Now, someone's going to say, well, aren't you justified? He didn't lend you your lawnmower. You're right. He didn't lend it to you, right? But if he comes to you and he asks you to do that, right, you should lend it to him unless you think it's going to damage it. If he's got a reputation, then he just damages things. He doesn't return them. He doesn't fix them. Okay. But if there's even a smidgen, a small amount in your mind that you just don't want to give it to him because you don't want to give it to him, that's revenge, right? I had a case many, many years ago, before cell phones and all that. I speak to my parents once a week and whatever. I was on this payphone and, someone said, you got to be long. I said, no, I don't think, whatever. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was. In the middle of the conversation, he takes the phone, he hung it up. I'm like, what in the world are you doing? He says, been on the phone too long, I need the phone.
Oh.
Well, what was this rude person's, what was the justification? Why did he need the phone? Because right where I was calling from was outside a pizza place. And the pizza place wasn't open. So he calls up the owner and he says, my family here is hungry. How come you're not open? You should be open. Right? Not to mention, I got embarrassed, and what this guy did. Now imagine, okay, I go back to learn. And he comes in the study hall and he comes up to me and says, by the way, can I borrow your pen? Out of the blue, I have a pen sitting on my desk, sitting where I'm learning. He says, can I borrow your pen? Now, if I would say, are you out of your cotton picking head? Look what you just did, you idiot. I should give you my pen. Comes along the Torah and says, if you don't lend him this pen, because you're angry of what they just did, now you're justified. You are 100% justified. This person has no leg to stand on at all. What he just did. And now you want to borrow my pen? I said, you don't want to know where I want to stick this pen? Right? If you would say it, even if you don't say it, you say, no, I'm not lending it to you. I can't lend it to you. Right? I'm not lending it to you. Go ask someone else. Right? That's a Torah prohibition of taking revenge. Because why are you not going to lend it to him? 1 second. Why are you not going to lend it to him? Because you're ticked off what he did. That is taking revenge. Yeah, question.
Okay. Now, I have a hard time with this to a degree. I mean, I'm only human. I got my own minor debilitation, and I'm very reactionary with a lot of negativity. You
didn't fit in the machine. They would have found out all your problems.
Where's the marbles rolling around?
Go ahead. Yeah, you get a haircut. You would have fit in. Yeah.
Oh, the question being, in my thought process, how in the Torah, halakha allows if somebody is trying to kill you,
right?
You have the right to preserve your life, and in return, even if they're trying to kill you, kill them in return. And I'm not condoning, the flagrant murder, but in the event of like we're talking around,
you have the
prohibition
ability to protect yourself.
Yes, but in this prohibition,
yourself, for sure, yeah.
In this prohibition that you can't react in a certain way. I'm trying to balance, when is it, if you're trying to be tutorial backwards, if somebody treats you in a malevolent way. Can you not put them in check? Like I was a chess player.
Check.
And so I believe, in a pushback to a degree, but not to the point of harm.
Why? You can question why someone's doing something. You can say, that was the first thing I said. I was like, what in the world did you do? He said, you were on the phone for too long. You didn't deserve to be on the phone too long.
And now you want my pen?
Right.
Why do you want why should I give you my pen?
Not wanting the pen. You're allowed to answer the person. You're allowed to say, listen, I don't think you had a right to do that. Person could say, like this person said, you were on the phone too long. Right. And I mean, he didn't say this, but, pizza's more important than you speaking to your parents. Right. But you can argue, you can get in a discussion. But even if you don't get anywhere with the discussion, which you probably won't, right? But even if you don't get anywhere, if this person comes to you and asks you to borrow your pen, you have to forget about what just happened.
Not a grudge, not grudgingly.
Doesn't matter. Let's say it was a month before. You're still upset about this, right?
Okay. I need to understand this. I really need to understand this, Rabbi, because,
you could really say a month ago, do you remember what you did? Do you remember what you said to me? Etc. I would be within my right means to say, like, you really want to borrow my pen? Well, why don't I deserve an apology? I got a better idea. Why don't you call my parents and explain to them what you just did? Right? Now, I would be within my rights to say that, right? And say, like, don't you think you owe me an apology? And the person may feel bad. Right? Maybe they will.
Odds are they won't, though.
Maybe they will apologize. Right? You give them an opportunity, let's say. Right? They could be stubborn as a mule. Can't imagine that, but they could be stubborn. They could feel justified. Mm-hmm. And they could say, I don't feel like I did anything wrong. Now, again, you can go back and forth. I'll give you an example. Someone did something to me very nasty. Right? Very nasty. And they quoted the Rambam. I don't know where they found this Rambam, but they quoted the Rambam saying, I think I mentioned the story before, saying that if someone comes to you for forgiveness, you have to forgive them. You absolutely have to forgive them. Because if not, you're considered cruel. Right. So they say, well, don't you, Maimonides, you hold the Maimonides, right? I said, yes. So they said, well, if someone comes to you, asks for forgiveness, then you have to accept their forgiveness. Now, if they come a second time, you don't forgive them. If they come a third time, you don't forgive them. You get the transgression, right? If they bring a whole bunch of people, try and appease you, and all that. So that's why we should accept them straight away. Because if we accept them, even though it's hard for something they did against us, God's going to accept what we did against him, right? Measure for measure.
Beautiful.
But what did the person say? Person came back and said like this. They said, but this thing that I'm doing has already been done in the past. But this has already happened in the past, years before. Right now, let me ask you. I'm going to ask everybody listening. Does that sound like an apology? That does not sound like an apology. That sounds like what Whoopi Goldberg said, suck it up, right? Isn't that what she said? Like Trump won, you lost, suck it up. We had to suck it up, right? That's what this person saying, right? Years later, she didn't even have intention for Whoopi Goldberg, right? But okay, in the end, that's what they're saying. You have to deal with it. Maybe you have to, go to a psychologist, be able to deal with it, right? But they're not saying, I am sorry. If they're not saying, I am sorry, I understand what they're coming for. They are coming, they do feel bad to a certain extent, right? But I wanted to make the point that what the Rambam says is if they come and apologize, they come and admit they've done something wrong. Comes on the Rambam in another context, and he says when you stand in front of God on Yom Kippur, when obviously applying to Jews, all you have to say is, I have sinned. I don't have to go through the beating my chest 5 times and all that. That's all extra.
Sackcloth
The Torah obligation is to say, I've done something wrong. That's the Torah obligation. Very hard thing to do for a lot of people, to admit they've done something wrong. So all I needed to hear, now, if this person would have said, I really feel bad, and regardless of what you think about it, this is the reality. I do understand why you would be upset. 1 second, and in essence, what they're really saying is, I do apologize, but I'm not gonna change, and this is the way it is, right? But that's not the way it sounded. They weren't trying to, to appease me to ad nauseum. Say, no, you have to understand, and and this happened, and that happened, and no, it was, you have to suck it up. You have to deal with it. This is the reality. Well, that is not, in my opinion, and you could disagree, right? I'll shred you if you do, right? But my opinion is, it's my way, the highway, right? Because that's what we see in the world. You don't like me? I'll boot you off my page, right? So that's not an apology. Now, if the person still is going to do what they're going to do and they do apologize, yeah, then the onus is on me. And that, in this thing, I'm not going to say what it is, but this thing would be very, very, very hard to accept in my heart that this other person is just being used like a rag doll by God. And this is part of my, this is part of my, what do you call it? Certain things that I have to go through, right? Regardless of what it is, right? And that's the reality. It's still a harsh reality, right? But, in the end, if somebody says, listen, they're trying to appease you, and they say, I really feel bad, I shouldn't have done it, I understand the pain you're going through. Could you ever forgive me? Then you're on the spot. Even if they stole your money, part of your money, or they did all kinds of other things. Now, for someone to say, go to hell, I'm not accepting your apology, and they come back again, and they come back again, that's an act of cruelty, right? That's what the Rambam's talking about. There has to be remorse. There has to be regret. There has to be an apology. If there's not an apology, now let me ask, why do I have to accept it? I know where it was going, but that was not an apology. That was not saying, I feel bad. I can understand, I can understand how you feel. It's Whoopi Goldberg, right? Suck it up. You have to deal with it. Now that's like taking, that's like having an open wound and putting iodine there and putting salt there. You don't have to tell me what's going on. I see it. I hear it, right? I hear it on a weekly basis. But you don't have remorse. You don't feel bad. And you just say you have to deal with it. So I made the point. So I'll tell this long story. I'll make this short story long. And that is, according to what you're telling me right now, according to what Maimonides says, does not apply. Doesn't apply. Why not? Because you're not saying, I'm sorry. So I said to this person, if you would say, I feel bad, if you would say, I'm sorry, whatever, that might be a different story. But you're not telling me that. So what was the response? The obvious response, can't deal with you. You're stubborn. You're, you think the way you want. You make up things the way it goes. Okay, right? But again, if we would go back to one of my favorite shows, right? Go back to Happy Days years ago. Go back to Arthur Fonzarelli. Could he ever say, I'm sorry? Never.
Whoa.
He would always say, right? He would never say it, right? He would never, ever say it, right? If the person had difficulty saying the words, and then you see, okay, there is some level of remorse, that's one thing. But for goodness sakes, they tell you have to deal with it. That's not an apology. And therefore, in that case, the Rambam doesn't apply. Yeah, question.
Okay, taking it a little further still, Rabbi, a little further still, because, when you're dealing with people that are malicious or malevolent and unapologetic, I mean, I have heard the rabbis talk that it is, sometimes even necessary for a loving parent to feign anger, to actually look wroth or stern, but feign it. Don't let it touch their heart. Right. But when you're dealing with people in interactive and they're acting in a way that's rude, ignorant, can we not put them in check? And sometimes this is where I run into problems. Check. People think I'm being cruel when in reality
you can't. I'm not saying you can't you have to be respectful, right? So we should be respectful. You can have a discussion. You're allowed to put them in check. I always say, you should always have some level of like a snappy answer, if someone asks like a snappy question, right? The one question I've never been able to answer because no one's ever really
Turtle
asked
soup.
it. People will say, people ask obnoxious questions. I get this a lot from, different people sometimes. And people ask obnoxious questions, right? About Judaism and their hatred of Judaism or self-hating Jew, whatever. Someone would say, hey, isn't circumcision barbaric? And what's the answer? Barbarians don't do it. But I've never been able to use that as an answer, right? So, I had a relative make a really obnoxious comment. And my wife and I just we had all these answers to like snappy questions. And we just answered it like this. We just put this person in their place, in a nice way. And it's like, wow, you guys are harsh. You guys are this. I'm like, you make an obnoxious comment. You don't think I'm going to answer? I mean, imagine if I didn't have Torah behind me, I would have just pounced on you. I mean, not physically. I just, I got a big mouth, as most people can probably figure out. I just let my mouth go. I would just flatten this person like a pancake.
Quick talker, as Seinfeld
I'm sure no
say.
one can imagine that. But I back in the day, yeah, I wouldn't have let up. I just would have gone bam, 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 bam. But that was it. We nipped it in the bud. This person never confronted us again. Right? Never. Because it's like, oh, you guys are so tough. I'm like, you're obnoxious. That's an obnoxious thing to say. You don't think we're going to answer? Not everything I would say is worth answering, especially when it comes to family, because it doesn't go anywhere. So I learned over the years, the hard way, and the easy way and the hard way, mostly the hard way, many things are not worth answering, right? It's only worth it, you have to pick your issues. Now, if it's something where, let's say it's not family, right? You get confronted somehow. You want to pick a fight with someone for no reason? You don't necessarily want to pick a fight with somebody, but if someone comes and, and attacks you and there's nobody home to listen to, you walk away, right? You absolutely walk away because, you're going to be talking to a brick, right? They're not holding the same way, right? That's exactly what the Haggadah says, right? The Haggadah by Passover, right? 10 weeks. I keep telling my wife 10 weeks, right? Where 2 weeks to Tu B'Shvat, a month, and then 4 weeks after that is Purim. A month after Purim is Passover. We got 10 weeks, right? So on Passover, in the Haggadah, it says there are 4 sons, right? There's a wise son, there's an evil son who doesn't know how to ask, and a simple son, right? So now, if you look at the question of the evil son and the wise son, they're very similar. The wise son you give an answer to, right? You give him an answer, don't eat after the Afikomen. Don't eat after that last piece of matzah. That's your answer to him. The evil son, you don't answer. You blunt his teeth. You don't give him an answer. Now, even if he's an evil son, they ask the same question. What's the difference? Right? Why don't you give him an answer? And not only that, but the Haggadah says, had he been in Egypt, he never would have come out.
Wow.
So you got to ask yourself the question, isn't there something called Kiruv? Don't you want to draw him close? Why aren't you going to give him an answer? So the famous story of Chaim Brisker. Chaim Brisker, of blessed memory, one of the Torah giants more than 150 years ago. He had a student, and the student, he had in the yeshiva, the Volozhin yeshiva, this student went sour. Now, after a while, he confronted the student. He saw the student, and he asked him, he said, what happened? He said, what happened to you? Why'd you go sour? So the student had questions. I had a lot of questions. So if Chaim Brisker asked him, he said, when did you have the questions? Did you have the questions when you were learning in yeshiva? He said, or did you have the questions when you had already left the yeshiva? And his answer was, I had questions when I left the yeshiva. So said Rav Chaim Brisker, then I can't answer you. Because if you had questions in the yeshiva you're already holding somewhere, then we can get to an answer. But the fact you had questions after the fact, these aren't questions. These are called an agenda, right? These are called answers. In other words, I cannot answer an answer, right? If someone says, I think, just on this topic, I think Judaism discriminates against women. Now, what's the answer to that? The answer is, I think Judaism should make women rabbis. What's the answer? You say, I think Judaism discriminates against homosexuals. What's the answer? You say, right? Why do you keep saying oh? And this person's going to get really upset because you didn't ask a question. You're not asking a question. You're making a statement. So they said, if I were to ask you, does Judaism really discriminate against women? What would you say? Okay.
Oh.
That's a question already. That seemingly you want an answer. But if you're making a statement, right. And when you make a statement, that means I have an agenda. If I have an agenda, you don't care what I have to say, right? In other words, you're giving me an answer. You're telling me an answer. I can't answer an answer. Said Rav Chaim Brisker to his student, if you have questions after the fact, these are not questions, right? These questions are answers, right? If they're answers, then there's no point to ask. There's no point for me to answer, right? So I learned over the years, some people ask questions to ask questions. Some people ask questions because they're obnoxious, right? And they just want to make fun of you, right? And those questions you don't have to answer, right? I'll just give an example. I was in a restaurant, kosher restaurant, and we're eating bagels, and someone says, hey, why do you have to keep kosher anyways? No problem tricking noses. Right? Somehow there's this theory that the only reason we keep kosher because they didn't have proper heating, they didn't have proper elements, and pig and trichinosis and all that. But I said, my quick answer was, because they weren't, this person was not going to be interested in an answer either way. So I said, but what does trichinosis have to do with it? You're eating a bagel. A bagel has nothing to do with trichinosis. They're like, yeah, whatever, pass the salt. They weren't, so it was clear. They weren't interested in an answer, right? So you have to strip away the question and see what they're asking. Some people, again, will ask a question because they want an answer. Some people ask a question because, say, hey, where was God, during the Holocaust? So I got a great book. It's called The Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. You want to read it? They're like, no, but it's a question I ask rabbis to make them fidget. Okay. And then, okay, I got better things to do with my time. I go watch the hair I don't have my head grow. Okay. If someone really wants an answer, you can tell. You should be able to tell by the question. Now, some things we may not have the answer to, right? So you have to be honest. Say, I'm not really sure. I'll get back to you, etc. You should never give, a half answer if you're not really sure. But you have to ascertain why is the person asking the question. And if they have an agenda, right, that your answer is not going to matter. So therefore, there's no point to give an answer. Like, I'll give another example because I know you want to ask something. I'll give another example. Someone once asked me. I mentioned something about, about a Jewish soul, etc. So someone asked me, says, well, can you explain that to me in 30 seconds about reincarnation? Do you know anyone as fast as I could speak could speak about reincarnation, could speak about life after death in 30 seconds? I said, I'll send you a video. Not one that I made. I'll send it from someone else. Then you can determine, but that's where most people are holding, right? Ketchup or mustard on my hot dog. That's the most important question people ask. And no one has an attention span. Everything's DVR. So you got 4 screens in front of you, watching 8 different things in a cooking show, right? All these different things. And you say, this is a major question about Judaism, right? I'll give one other example because it's a funny joke that, will make it a little bit lighter here. That there was a rabbi at a conference of science and Torah. And, if there are contradictions in science and Torah, there aren't. I know you've had a lot of fun with this. So this scientist comes up, this rabbi, and he says, couldn't you just sum up all of Judaism by being nice to each other? You have to be nice to your fellow neighbor. Love your fellow neighbor like yourself. Couldn't you sum up all of Judaism in that? So this rabbi turns to him and he says, you're a scientist, right? He said, yeah. He says, couldn't you sum up science to twinkle, twinkle, little star? I don't think scientists was too happy with that answer. It's a great answer though, right? Somebody who says something like that, and there are major philosophical works, written on this. They're not interested in an answer, right? They're making light of it. They're saying, oh, doesn't it really mean, twinkle, doesn't it really mean be nice to each other? Isn't that what it's all about? Just a whole bunch of rules? No, actually, it's not. It's very complicated. You want to hear about it? No. But tell a scientist that. Tell a science all of science is based on twinkle, twinkle, little star, right? I think they, I think they might get a little bit ticked off. You say, well, that's very superficial. Thank you very much. Isn't what you just said very superficial about, about Judaism? Yeah, question.
Well, backing it up a little bit because, I've been accused in the past of having an agenda. I like to think I have a purpose, but I've had a lot of false accusations. Say you got an agenda, I like to think purpose. But the reality is, when you're saying about when somebody leaves the yeshiva and then they come back with a question, it's more a formulated retort or reply. I get that. But do not people need time to decipher and digest? And I ask this because our friend Sandra Thorgan out there on YouTube, she's also asked, she says, just answer with a lot of Jewish terms. They won't get any of it anyways. And the reality is, especially for us B'nai Noach, we don't understand the depth of the terms. And I find this so fascinating because I've heard a lesson. It's great. It's profound. I got a difference of opinion, but I have to understand this Jewish term a little better. So I spend a lot of time researching it. I come back and ask a question, and it's almost like you got an agenda. I don't know if it's just the teacher wants to play this. I'm the teacher. You be quiet.
Well, they have to see. They have to see by the question, where the question's coming from. I mean, whatever. Like I said, I've seen it many times. People ask things that I misinterpreted what they're saying. No, I didn't mean that. I really meant this. Right? You have to be able to read between the lines. Sometimes it's not so easy, right? Some people may try and trap you, different things. So, you got to be careful with that. But you're 100% right in this. Well, I should say 100% right. We all have an agenda, right? People say, well, I've had people accuse me, you want everyone to be Orthodox, every Jew. I said, well, that's the way it was 250 years ago, and then the Reform movement came, and the Conservative movement came. I said, everyone was Orthodox before. Well, not all Jews are going to be Orthodox. Okay, I see that, right? I realize that. So they say, well, that's your agenda. I said, if people don't want to drink the Kool-Aid, they won't. If they're not convinced, okay, everyone's got free will. That's very true. But if someone asks you, well, isn't that true? You want all Jews to be religious, and you want all non-Jews to be Noahites? 100%. That's an agenda, right? We all have an agenda. My
Purpose.
agenda, most people, my agenda, most people know, it's certainly not to be politically correct, A, but B, to give Torah the best way possible, right? To give it over. I certainly have an agenda, right? That there's no question. You don't like it. Okay. But you're not, you see, the point, the thing is also
be honest with yourself.
People throw things at you, and it's not based on truth. See, it's one of the things I can't stand. Most people know, it's about fraud. It's about misrepresentation. So people will say, I don't have to be Orthodox, and I can be what I want, and, you have to accept it. Well, I don't necessarily have to accept it. I can definitely say it's wrong and say, oh, you're against pork, and you're against this, and you're against that. It has nothing to do with me, right? It has to do with the Torah says, right? The Torah's against this, and the Torah's against that. So I said, so you have a problem with Torah, but they're not arguing, and they're not saying the Torah's not true, right? What are they arguing? They're saying, I'm not going to do it. They're saying, I'm not going to keep it, right? Clearly. I'm going to do what I want to do, and they have their own agenda. Okay, but that does not nullify that the Torah is not true. I said, you know what? I got hard evidence. I got a lot of hard evidence to show that it's true. They're not interested. Right. You're not going down that path. You're not having that discussion. Why not? Because you might prove them wrong, right? Most non-Jews coming out of Christianity, what's the last thing for them to give up? JC. If I give up on JC, I may find out forever, right? So for a long time, they're not going to look at what Rabbi Skobach says. They're not going to look at Rabbi Singer. They're not going to look at these things because they don't want to hear the other side. Someone's going to say, what? I've been in the church 50 years. Think they've been lying to me? Yes. What do you think? They don't want me to question? Yes. Right? There's a lot of things going on. That's the final thing. Because if they have so many contradictions and so many historical inaccuracies, what's the last thing that's going to stop them? The J guy. frying in hell forever. They don't want to do that.
Right.
They absolutely don't
100%.
want to do that. So until they're at the point where they've seen so many inaccuracies and all this, then they can look at the material.
Yep.
Right? But what do you do? What do you do if you're a Jew married to a non-Jew? And then someone comes along and bursts your bubble and says, okay, you've been living a travesty of a mockery of a sham, in my language, years or more. With your kids aren't Jewish and all this. And what if I'm right? If I'm right, that means your life is useless right now. Right? Your life's going to be turned on its head.
Ooh.
Right? So someone once told me many years ago, if I look into it and I find out it's true, I'm not going to change, so I'm not going to bother. Right? That's showing intellectual honesty. Right? But if someone confronts the truth and they find out they've been living their life as a sham, that's going to be a game changer. And they're not going to do it. They're not going to want to do it.
Cognitive dissonance.
So what are they going to answer? They're going to say, when it comes to intermarriage, yeah, it's not that bad. But if you would ask most Jews know you're not allowed to marry a non-Jew. They'll say, yeah, but, and I always say, forget about the but. Are you allowed to marry a non-Jew or not? Right? Are you allowed to be with a non-Jew if you're a Jew? Right? Yes or no? There's no buts. Right? No buts over here. It's either yes or no, A or B. Right? If the answer is B, then you understand. But then you're going to say, oh, but it doesn't apply to that generation. It only applied, till they moved to the land of Israel. It only this, whatever, all this mumbo jumbo. Bottom line is, Torah says more than half a dozen times you're not allowed to intermarry. So you can't justify, right? There's no justification. So what's the answer going to be? When someone told me, he said, you're just a fanatic. I said, of course I'm a fanatic, but give me an answer. But they're not going to go down that path. Why they're not going to go down that path? Because you are delegitimizing their entire life. I get it. But that doesn't mean they're intellectually honest. They're totally not intellectually honest. Right? I don't know if they'll admit that or not. But they will not let you get in that discussion. Because if you show any type of proof, they got a problem. They got a major problem. So most people are not intellectually honest. Most people do not want to hear the truth. And it's not about whether the Torah is true or not, right? What is it about? It's about, I want to live my life. I don't want to hear anything else, and I'm justified in whatever I'm doing. But you're not, but I am. And that's it. That's where the discussion ends, because they're never going to give you the time of day. They're never going to, you're not speaking in the same language. You're not asking the same questions. The questions that are important to you doesn't matter to them, right? You can say, what about Jewish continuity? What about this? And they'll think, well, I think my kids are Jewish and they also think they're Jewish. Okay. But but 10% of world Jews doesn't think they're Jewish. 10% doesn't think they're Jewish. So that probably ticks you off. So why does it tick you off then? Because it could be what we're saying is actually true. Right? So I use this argument. I said, listen, everyone else is going to bend over backwards to flatter you. And say, what great kids, what great this, what great that, except me. I said, except me. I'm not going to say your kids are bad or whatever. I'm just going to say they're not part of the tribe. Right? And I was like, that's a terrible thing. How could you say that? Because that's what I believe. And that's what Orthodox Jews, believe. It's the same thing. Give one example. It's a similar thing. You read the book of Esther. Right? You read the book of Esther. And Haman walks outside. Mr. Haman himself walks outside. And there was this idol cult in his time. Anytime he walked in the room, everyone bowed. Everyone got on the floor. Walks outside, comes in front of Mordechai, doesn't bow. Now, he's got money, he's got wealth, fame, he's got everything going for him. This one Jew doesn't bow. And he says, not only am I going to kill him, I want to kill the entire Jewish nation. Because he knows the truth. Because he knows it's just a fake. He knows. He was a barber for 22 years, right? He knows what the reality is. And he doesn't want to see that reality. He doesn't want to hear that reality. What does Mordechai represent? That reality. So if you represent the reality of absolute truth, and you're the only one in your group like you will say that their kids aren't Jewish, that's going to tick them off because they know that's the truth. They know that even if 90% praise them and they're Jewish and don't worry about it. They can have a bar mitzvah. They can be called to the Torah. They can do all these great things within Judaism. So why are you going to be ticked off at me? Right. And this is one of the things I said, which, didn't really go anywhere. Right. But I said, you realize that, I'm only, 10% of these quote unquote fanatics. I said the 90% will make you feel like, unbelievable. I'm going to tell you the way it is. And you don't want to hear it from a minority, but guess what? Something gets under your skin. Why does it get under your skin? Because I delegitimize who your spouse and who your kids are. I'm not saying they're bad people.
I take it personally.
They're not Jewish. Just saying that they're not Jewish and don't think that they're Jewish, right? But what gets at the person, what gets under their skin is the fact that you are not giving in like everybody else. Yeah.
Can I say, something similar along those lines? I have difficulty with my young daughter, right? Mm-hmm. And she's with a gentleman and they're not married. And I have stood against this from the get-go and the problems that come, he's got a child from a former, and I just don't treat the child like a grandchild. I don't recognize the situation, the scenario for a lot of the reasons that you're mentioning here. And though I've tried, it just is a complete clash. And, my daughter says I don't respect her. But the reality is if I didn't respect her, I would have separated them from the get-go. And I could have. And I easily could have. But I just step back and I say, okay, you're on your own. And it aches and it pains. But the reality is, it's a bust. To be involved, I'd have to burst the bubble endlessly just to get across anything. And I say to myself, how can I rectify this? It's like talking to a one-way door. They'll only accept what they'll only accept.
Either there are values, or there aren't. And, someone could argue and say, what makes your values? Why do you think you're right? Why do you think you're justified? Right? People living together, having kids, it's more successful than marriage. That's true. That has definitely been proven. Right? Once they get married, 75% divorce rate. Once they live together. Right? Like Victor Miller, blessed memory, one of the Torah giants of the last generation said, how do you kill a great romance? Get married. Right? So the institution of marriage totally under siege. And, there's more than 50% people that get divorced. So yeah, if it wouldn't be for morality, in general, then yeah, people do what they want, and it doesn't really matter. But the point is that if a person wants to have moral value and the other person questions it and they say, well, who are you to say where these moral values come from? Then you can have a discussion, right? But if they don't respect morality in general, and they're just going to say, I'm going to do what I want, you have to accept it, and that's pretty much, ultimatum that I was given. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. What's done is true, but that doesn't change my stance on anything, right? It doesn't change anything. Now, you might think, oh, it's racist, it's this, it's all kinds of things, but that does, it's a harsh reality. Right, but the person's not asking. They're not asking what's behind. What's behind what you believe. My non-Jewish kids, according to you, what are they, second-class citizens? No, they're not second-class citizens. Right? They're just not Jewish. It's not like some people would say converts maybe look down upon, so to speak. Maybe some people don't think they're 100% legitimate Jews or whatever, right? I'm not saying that's right, but there will be some people that will question, different things. In this case, in my community, everyone will say, these kids aren't Jewish, right? Now, you want to understand why? You want to have a discussion? It's not going there. They're saying, well, this is blood. This is blood. You're right. Technically, that's true, right? It's not a question of being second-class citizens. So how do you view it? They're not Jews like any non-Jews, right? That, they have to be respected, no question. But I don't have to say they're Jewish. Why do I have to say they're Jewish? You want to put me in a corner and say they are absolutely Jewish? They're not. Right? The father's not Jewish. You go by the father, not the mother. Right? They're not Jewish. Too bad. That's you made a choice. That's the repercussion. Live with it. Oh, what are you upset about? You're upset about I delegitimize. Okay, so be upset. Right? But I understand why you're upset. You're upset because what I say you might think is true. Or could be true. And if it's true in any way, shape, or form, what does it mean? It means I'm doing the wrong thing. It means my life is a sham, and nobody wants to admit that, right? Exactly. So some people will never get in the discussion. They're not going to say, "Well, where'd you get your morals from?" They're like, "Dad, why do you think that? Where do you get these morals from?" Oh, but it's based on, it's based on Judaism. It's based on these laws. They don't want to hear it. They want to do whatever they want to do, and they want acceptance. Right? Someone could say, well, you have to accept gays. I don't have to accept them. Torah says forbid it. Doesn't mean I go out and harass them, right? You're not allowed to do that. But who says I have to say that what they do is okay, right? You want me to admit something I can't admit? I'm not going to admit it. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you say, right? It's irrelevant. Someone who's into marriage, someone's gay is wrong, according to the Torah, right? So it's according to your version. According to your beliefs, okay, right? But that goes back 3,000 years. We got 3,000 years of history. You want to be a Reformed Jew, whatever, it goes back more than 100 years. That's it. Not 3,000 years. So you have a problem with the Torah says, right? As I mentioned a number of things. You're Torah's anti-pig, anti-this, anti all kinds of things, but you don't understand why. And then I threw out there, well, how can you make a comment on anything if you have a second grade education and you can barely read Hebrew, right? But you got very strong opinions about something you know nothing about, right? As I always say, I'm going to read a Wikipedia article on physics and I'm going to knock off Stephen Hawking. I'm going to knock him off because I read an article on Wikipedia. That's what they're saying. You've been learning for 25 years. I don't care. I have my own
brief
opinion.
History of time.
Yeah.
Let me give it to you.
You have your opinion. I have my opinion. Yeah, but I've been learning for 25 years. I know the sources, most of them. Right, I may forget here and there. Right, there's plenty of what I remember, what I know. You know anything? You didn't even see the movie. You didn't even see the movie, the Bible. So what are you commenting on? I have to show respect for that. Come on, right? If Stephen Hawking were alive, I'm going to sit there and hammer about physics. Go wipe the floor with me. Right? What do I know about
agenda?
Physics?
It's the agenda you spoke about earlier.
Right. That's what it is. But it's again, one of my personal pet peeves. Is people try and talk a good game about things they know nothing about. You wouldn't sit there and argue with someone who's got a PhD in the subject if you don't know anything about the subject, except if you're Jewish, right? You wouldn't, and you talk authoritative. And it's a joke. I see this all the time. People make comment after comment after comment. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. Not a clue. They read something, they heard something, taken out of context, not taken out of context. Okay, so I'll humor some people. I'll listen, right? I'll listen to the argument, but it's going nowhere because they'll say, I believe this. Well, why do you believe it? Because that's what I believe. That's what my quote unquote, my society tells me, or that's what I think, or, whatever the case is, but it's not based on fact. It's not based on research. It's not based on looking at the topic. So why do people think they have the ability to speak? Right? I just find it ironic. If someone's got, if someone's been learning for years, it's like they have a PhD. If they have a PhD, what are you arguing with them? Go learn. That's what you have to do. Go learn. Oh, but if I learn, I'm going to get delegitimized. If I get delegitimized, it's going to be a big problem. I get it. But I just wish more people would admit it. Because they're not, one second, they're not admitting that the Torah is not true. They just say, well, you can think what you want. Oh, you can do this. Oh, whatever it is. They're not, if they were on a debating team, they get an F. They get an absolute F because they're not arguing the case. They're just saying, I don't believe this. Why don't you believe it? Because I don't. I don't think that way. It's square. Why is it square? Why is it, it's cultish. Why? Show me facts. Show me something that it's true or not true. But just don't talk out of your elbow. I can't stand that. Yeah, question.
Well, I just wanted to flip this back because I mean, I was a former educator in a Christian school, and I've written several books and whatnot. The point being, when I started, I've spent 28 years now researching that flood material that and the point being, I don't have a PhD. Okay, I don't have it piled high and deeper. Like you've said before, but the reality is I've spent 27 years on it. I followed the magnetic anomaly data before it was even visual. Okay. So I was reading the data and triangulating points. The point of the matter is that I think if I had to go down the PhD road, I never would have discovered what I did in fact discover and can validate by fact. If I went down the road, I knew that there were university professors. If you believe there's a God, you're out of here. You can't be a geologist and believe in God. It's just not possible. Right. You're failed right from the get-go. I mean, and so there are certain times I think Hashem takes people down a path, but Hashem rules the world. He's got it all under control, and what he determines will be brought to light does come to light in any way, shape, or form, even by people that are non-PhDs over those with PhDs, because I'm just flabbergasted with the evidence.
You're right, but you have to see the bigger picture. If you can't see the bigger picture, all the information doesn't matter, right? One of the things I mentioned, in my cosmology proof on Tanakh Talk about God-oriented universe is that both Einstein and Stephen Hawking proved through science and even through mathematics that the world seemingly looks like an expanding universe.
Of course.
So even though in his brief history of time at the end of the book, he says, you really shouldn't look at my information and, he can't believe that, and all that. Why? Even though he brought all the scientific proof for one very simple thing. And that is we can never say, and Einstein said this himself, we can never say the story of creation has anything to do with science. Now, there's any connection. Right now, as you know, I could be a little bit obnoxious. So I would have said to either one of them, okay, now you prove to me through science. Show me, you've shown to me in science. So if you showed to me in science, then you say, well, we're not going down the path of the Bible. We're not going to give in to the creationists. Okay, so you don't want to go that way. So you do believe that it looks like an expanding universe. So you maybe even say it's the Big Bang. You won't call it God, but you call it some sort of Big Bang. Okay, so then what? What happened before that? Right? So what's their conclusion going to be? Through science, there's only one conclusion: evolution. That's the only thing they can hang their hat on. So if it's evolution, have they ever proven the missing link? No. Are they ever going to prove the missing link? No. Right? If you read Dr. Schroeder's book, even if you take a monkey on the 5th day, is a 1% difference DNA, right? With a human, 1% difference with all the simultaneous mutations every second, 3 billion, 4 billion years, whatever it is, between the 5th and 6th day, you'll never have a monkey turn into a human. That's 1% difference DNA. That's not a paramecium, a paramecium to a hydrix, to a caterpillar, to a butterfly, to a rodent, to a bigger animal, whatever. So I would say, okay, right, in the 90s, I remember, there was a Newsweek article saying that they might have found the missing link, right? A jawbone and a set of teeth. That was it, right? So they haven't found the missing link. So I would have said, make a short story long here, so I would have said either to Einstein or to Hawking, find me the proof. Show me, according to science, because you're not going to believe in God, God forbid, right? You're not going to believe in creation. It's all about science. Show me the missing link. They said, we can't. We don't have proof. We don't have scientific proof. So what would my answer be? I would say, you just shut up and find me the proof. Show me the proof. So we don't have proof according to science. Oh, you don't have proof? What's the other alternative? You have no other alternative. The only other alternative is the Torah. That's the alternative. But we're not going to go down that path.
Right.
So you sound like a broken record. Find me the proof in science or not. If you don't have the proof in science, then you have to say that either we're eventually going to find it, which they won't, right? Or you have to at least entertain the possibility that what the Torah says is true.
Of course.
You have to entertain that. Neither one were willing to do it. So what is that called in the vernacular? It's called cognitive dissonance. That's what it is. It's refusing to
Asking
see
part of the question.
It's refusing to see what's in front of your face. So what happens with all these people, right? They know, according to quote unquote the Torah and whatever, what they're doing is wrong, right? But they'll justify it in a million different ways. They'll claim they'll be 100% more open-minded than you, me, everybody listening in a million years. They'll be 10 times more open-minded, except in what the information that they need. The information that's crucial for them to know, I don't have to see it. It's totally not true. It's totally irrelevant. That's what someone told me. It's totally irrelevant to my life. Oh, I can show you very easily how relevant it is. They're not even interested, right? Why? Because if I show the relevance, I open the door, their brains are going to start to work, and they're going to see their life as a travesty of a mockery of a sham. And they're never going to, never going to do that. So what happened to being open-minded? So there are very few people out there, even if they claim to be open-minded, are not open-minded. They're totally not open-minded. Like we said before, they have an agenda. Their agenda, like someone once told me, I know a conservative Jew, that told me so open-minded. I said, okay. I said, what do you think of Reform Jews? Oh, they're terrible. They're ruining Judaism. I said, what do you think about Orthodox Jews? Oh, they're fanatics. No one ever said you have to keep all these things and all that. What about, Reconstructionist Jews? They're really out there, this, that. What about conservative Jews? We're just right? It's kind of like the warm porridge by, by, what do you call it?
The Three Bears.
Yeah, right. Right, by Goldilocks. Right?
Goldilocks,
this
the
one,
Three Bears.
This one, it's just right. So I said, no, you're not open-minded. I said, you're an idiot. Because you're saying this one's wrong, this one's wrong, this one's wrong, and I'm right. Now, again, if you're going to have a debate and you're going to have a discussion, right? So you can have a debate, but if you're not, this is the point, is that if you're not talking in the same language, if you're not using the same parameters, right, you have to get them to see your side, right? So someone can say, right, I like this argument also. Someone will say, I'm an agnostic, right? What's an agnostic? They have doubts. They're not atheists. They're agnostic, right? They have doubts about God's existence. Okay. Well, I'm not going to say that's not a legitimate way to think, right? But if you were to ask them, okay, how long have you been an agnostic for? Oh, about 30 years. So if you looked at any information whatsoever that you might actually either become an atheist or actually somewhat believe that, there is a God. And what's the answer going to be? I haven't really thought about it. That's really what the answer is going to be. They might not admit it, right? But why they say they don't want to be, considered an atheist. Okay, right? They certainly don't want to be a believer. But if you have doubts, doesn't it make sense to clarify the doubts? That's what I would think.
But
what's the problem with clarifying the doubts? Then you find out you're wrong, right? And so nobody's looking at information, right? So it's not about you can't prove to me God's existence, right? They're not interested in going there. They're interested in just saying I'm an agnostic, right? So somebody like that, somehow
no pursuit of potential,
you
is there?
have to try and get in, somehow get in some conversation that gets them to open their mind a drop. I had somebody once, they mentioned something about, about goodness and being good. So I caught them in a conversation and I said, so what's your definition of good? How do you know what's good? What do you define it? So after like a few minutes, they saw where the conversation was going and they changed the subject. They stopped it, right? Because they understood, like what's morality based on? Where do I get information from? How do I know it's true? There are a million, there are a million questions. So again, most people, it's not about truth, right? Most people will say, I'm not going to keep it because I can't, or, and whatever. It's not about truth, right? That definitely not about truth. So, that's why, and we spend so much time here, because most people, when they throw things out, they're not interested in truth. They're absolutely not interested in truth. They are interested in doing what they want, and they don't want anyone telling them what to do, right? That's it. They don't want anyone telling them what to do, and that's their agenda. So having a discussion and trying to get them to see truth is almost going to be an impossibility, right? Because they will not open up. They'll put all kinds of defenses up there. They could say things, right? They could say things and you could call them on it, but they're still not going to answer. They say you may be right, but it doesn't matter, right? But you're not arguing on the side of whether it's true or it's not true, right? You're just arguing and saying, well, I disagree and I'm not going down that path and I'm not going to change, and this is the way it is, right? This is the way it is. You have to suck it up, right? That's it. You have no other choice, right? So everybody, including ourselves, we have an agenda. We definitely have an agenda, right? But you cannot claim to be open-minded and see the other side and not see the other side, right? My knockout blow to this, which didn't get anywhere, but my knockout blow was that, I know the secular world. I was there, right? And, Reformed Jews, conservative Jews, secular Jews, non-affiliated. I know what they're thinking, right? I've been there. So I said, I said to this person, you've never been on my side. You've never looked into it. So I said, if you can't read Hebrew, barely, you don't know, you know very little, how in the world can you argue? And how can you argue definitively? Right? And the answer is they can't. The answer is they have an agenda. And their agenda is what? Their agenda is never to engage in conversations going to make them uncomfortable. And it's going to make them maybe see that what they're doing is wrong. Right? Because I would ask the $1 million question, why do some people, think I'm an absolute fanatic, etc. Why would they care? Right? 95%, of world Jewry and probably most of the world will disagree, right? They'll disagree with most things that come out of my mouth, okay? Right? But it's not based on knowledge, right? So it's the same thing as Mordechai not bowing down. It's one thing you want to kill him. You want to kill the entire Jewish nation because he represents truth. And he knows what the truth is, right? And he knows as he's berating Haman, when Haman's taking him around, he's like, you liar. What do you mean you can't give a haircut? You were a barber for 22 years. I know that. Right? So, he's embarrassing him. But what does he represent to Haman? He represents truth. Right? He represents absolute truth. And he can't live the charade. So therefore, even one person who represents truth and knows the facts, and he won't bow, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to listen to your people. I'm going to annihilate you. But he's got everything, right? He's got all his sons as dukes in all these different places. He's got consolidated power, tremendous amount of power. Think about that power before Otto von Bismarck. Show my historic knowledge here, right? With Germany, all these feudal states, right? You put them together, they destroy the world, the Talmud says, right? They had all these dukes, etc. They put them all together, and it was a disaster for the world. Right? What did Haman have? He had money, he had power, he had his sons in all the right places. Right? So the $1 million question is, why in the world this one Jew, this one old Jew, what does he care? He's not going to bow down. He's got everything. Right? He's got the power, he's got money. Right? He's second in command, Achashverosh. Right? He's got everything in his power. But one Jew's not going to bow down, can't have that. Right? So most people do not want to hear what the truth is. And they'll make all kinds of excuses. Oh, look at these Orthodox Jews. And they do this. And they do that. And look how many people got caught doing this. Even if it's true, What does it have to do with Judaism? It means they failed, right? At a certain level. I mean, a major level here. It means they failed, right? But that has nothing to do with you, right? In other words, you could say, well, I don't do that, right? I had someone tell me this. I don't do that. I'm not so bad. So why do I have to keep the laws if they don't? What does one thing have to do with another? They are guilty. They are guilty. They'll pay a price. It has nothing to do with what you're going to do or not going to do. It's irrelevant, right? Totally irrelevant, right? We have to answer for ourselves. We get upstairs after 120 years. No one's going to say, how come you weren't like this one? How come you weren't like that one? And whatever. They're going to say, according to your soul makeup, how come you didn't do what you're supposed to do? Right? It's not about you comparing yourself to others. And you say, what are you asking me? Look what the other person did. Right? Look at all these other people did. God's not going to care. It's irrelevant. Why it's irrelevant? Because he gave everyone a soul, Jew or non-Jew. Every soul has a mission, right? They have a mission in this world. Some people do it better, some people don't. But in the end, they have to answer for what they've done. And it has nothing to do, I can't complain and say, hey, why are you giving me slack? What do you think? I'm a 6'7" white guy, can't fit in a machine? I can't get my head in the machine? It's come on, why are you comparing us? I don't have a 40-inch vertical leap like Spud Webb. I didn't have it, right? It's just not my, wasn't in my mechanic.
It was amazing, yeah.
And anyone knows what I'm talking about, right? But in that case, I'm not going to get judged according to that. I'm going to get judged according to whatever the source of my soul is, whatever the greatness it could have reached and what I did. It's not about what other people did. It's not about passing the buck, right? It's not about comparison between you and anybody else. It's about what you did in this world, right? And unfortunately, we're living in what we call an alama de shikra. We're living in a world of falsehood, and we see it all over the place. I don't think, I'm not going to get political, but we're living in unbelievable times, where all you have to see, is big tech coming out and censoring anyone who disagrees with them, and that is a scary phenomenon. What happened to free press, right? What happened? First Amendment, I have the right to say what I want. Who are you to suppress it, right? Unless you're making wars or doing other things. But you see all kinds of rogue regimes. They're all out there.
They may just be the messenger, though, Rabbi.
They're all out there. They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on YouTube, saying all their garbage, even if, let's say in China, they're suppressing a lot of it and they're only giving information they want to give, okay, but, why? It's funny, because the Republicans say no one listens to us. Democrats, they're just speaking at each other, and nobody listens. When Democrats do something, they call it freedom. When Republicans do something, it's sedition, right? Like two different definitions are pretty much the same, two different things, right? But when it comes to Orthodox Jews, it's like we're maligned. All these things are said against us, etc. And whatever we say is just never good enough, right? In other words, we get so maligned, even if there are Orthodox Jews that do the wrong thing. But, another pet peeve that I have, and this goes hand in hand what's going on today, is that people will say, we don't care what your opinion is. Your opinion is irrelevant. Now, they could say any wacky opinion they want. You could come out against it and say, hey, that's wrong and this. And they're going to say, who are you? Who are you to say anything? I'm entitled to my opinion. Well, I believe in right and wrong. Right? And according to the Bible and according to the Torah, there's right and wrong. They're like, you're a minority. We don't care what you think. It's irrelevant what you think. So what happened to free speech? What happened to free speech? I have to listen to your drivel. I have to listen to your garbage, right? That doesn't make any sense. But I say anything, you don't have to listen, right? You're a fanatic, you're this, but you don't even listen, right? So what do you have in the world today? You have people talking like this. They're not talking to each other. They're talking at each other. And once one person finishes, someone else goes on the attack, but they didn't hear a single word that you said, right? And there are contradictions all over the place. Just what's going on today with all the rhetoric and different things. There are contradictions. You can't say, oh, you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that. You just did it. You absolutely did it. Oh, but you call it freedom of speech. 2018, you didn't like the elect of the Supreme Court. Go back to what Kavanaugh represented. What did they do? They took over the Wisconsin legislature. They went in. Oh, that was freedom. That was absolute freedom. No one's saying what happened last week, was permissible and, violent and all that. But on the other hand, you got people yelling and screaming, go to the streets. In the summer, you got all these Democrats saying stuff. And we said, boo. They didn't say boo, right? About what's going on. They have a right. They have a right. They're right. Who gives anyone a right to burn things down? Doesn't matter what your political agenda is. Who gives them a right to burn things down? Nobody, right? But the catch-22. We say that's okay. Something happened last week, which everyone condemned. That's not okay. But they didn't burn down the cities, did they? Whatever it was, people don't talk to each other. And that's the point. And people don't listen. But when it comes to, I'm sure when it comes to Noahides, no different, than Orthodox Jews, people don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that I've been, that I could have been lied to for the last 50 years in the church. They don't want to hear that. It's as if to say, just like what, half the country is saying, in America, this is the way it is. That's it. Move on. Right? Move on. This is what we think. You don't like it, too bad. But there's no dialogue. Right? And this is what we're seeing now. Because you got polarization on both sides. So there is nobody to talk to. Right? Because they'll justify what they do. They'll condemn you when you do the same thing. Or not. Right? So, again, not to get political, when it comes to Jews in general, when it gets to Orthodox Jews, people don't want to hear what we have to say. It's like, you don't have a right to speak. What do I mean I don't have a right to speak? Right? You can say whatever you want. I have no right. Why do I have no right? You're not even listening to the information. People just, it's so polarized. Oh, you're a fanatic. Oh, you're this. Do you have any idea what it means? What Shabbos is? Do you have any idea what the mitzvahs are? You have no idea. But you're quick to condemn. You're quick to say, wow, in your communities, this virus is spreading like wildfire, et cetera. But you refuse to look at the demographics. Most Americans, you see them outside not wearing masks. And you see things going, skyrocketing. But why in our communities is it much greater? Because of demographics, right? One person gets it. You have 6 or 7 kids. People come, right? You can have many more people get it. We're much more social. Makes more sense. I'm not saying we don't have to guard ourselves. We absolutely do. But if you don't look in the bigger picture, oh, you're doing this and you're doing that. But there are a lot of people holding by the protocol. I mean, the numbers are staggering. The numbers, here in Israel right now, numbers are absolutely staggering, right? You got, I think the average right now is about 8%. They're doing more tests as well, but it's about, 8% of those tests that are getting are positive, right? And, in the ultra Orthodox community and by the Arabs, it's exponential. It's much higher than that. The average gets 8%. So it could be they're doing more testing, even though someone told me that the more testing they do, the numbers should go down, right? Technically, but again, there are demographics. That even if it's spreading like wildfire, the fact that people live in close quarters, that would mean if someone gets it, a lot more people can get it one shot.
Should
it can happen.
I've saw it happen to a family here. Yeah.
You're not doing enough, right? There are plenty of people, unfortunately, they're not wearing masks. I get it, right? I definitely understand it. I shouldn't say I understand. I don't understand why people won't. Okay, it's a whole fight. You should wear masks, shouldn't wear masks, but more people can get affected.
Hazmat suit.
Right. More people are getting infected. We see it's going like wildfire. So, they're just trying to inoculate, as many people as possible. So at least to get by, hopefully, the next few months, get 70% of the population here in Israel, that have already gotten the shots, then okay. That's a whole different ballgame. There's still people sick and dying. It's no question. Someone I knew, just had all kinds of medical issues. it was on a ventilator. I don't know why, it didn't go to the hospital, whatever. His oxygen was very low, and then whatever, he just died. So these things are very, unfortunately, very real, and that's why, trying to inoculate as many people as possible. But
we heard over here, Rabbi, a doctor down in Florida, an actual medical doctor who's healthy as a fiddle, got the injection and passed away, suddenly as a result of the
there are anomalies.
Weird, rare complication.
I saw a video of someone who got Bell's palsy, even though that's not permanent. That's not permanent, where your face gets distorted and all that. Yeah. And there have been a few people here, that died from it, but they had other circumstances. That the odds of that happening are very small. Are very, very small, and therefore it's not enough. Certainly not enough. You have here, there. It's definitely not a risk. 1 in 1,000 is considered a danger. This is much higher. This would be like 1 in, 100,000. 1 in a million. The odds are very, very, very small. Something like that could happen, right? If you go according to most doctors, they'll tell you should take it. No question that you should take it, and the effects should be minimal. Effects should, now, can it happen? Can something happen? Yeah, it's interesting. You can't sue the company. That is an interesting thing. You cannot sue the company if something happens.
Wrong.
So they don't want to take full.
They didn't produce it until they had the exemption.
Okay. But I would say, listen, if you take 2 shots, they were talking about here only doing 1 shot, but if you take 2 shots and it's 94% or 95%, you have to put your best foot forward over here, because you definitely don't want to get it, even if most people it's not going to affect them. I have a friend of mine much younger, or about 20 years younger than me, a little bit, probably more, 25 years younger than me. Okay, got it. He said he was sick. He had a bad flu. It's like a bad flu. And that was it. So most people are not going to succumb to it. Younger people for sure not. But what did God show? Right? I mentioned this a few weeks back. What did God show? That even if you're younger, you could get it and die. Right? You definitely could. So what is God? Yeah. So what is God showing over here? If it's time to go, it's your time to go. But you shouldn't take it lightly either way. Right? Not by younger people. I have I blame her. I have 2 daughters ready, about to give birth. They're not really going anywhere. They just, even almost, coming to us, because they don't want to have to be in isolation, and they just don't want to have any, they don't want to have any issues. I got like a week to go, whatever it's going to be. So, that makes sense. You want to take certain, certain precautions. These things are real. So you can't just stick your hand in the sand, head in the sand and say, well, it's not going to affect me. I can do what I want. We mentioned you're affecting others. You got, you also, we mentioned earlier. See, I told you we're not going to get that far with this. that we mentioned
great
earlier.
Mishnah, though.
Yeah, we spent a while here, but we mentioned earlier that you still have to have common sense. And common sense tells you right now there's an unbelievable infection rate, right? America's scrambling. They have, they're debating who to take in ambulances. Hospitals are filled up the gazoo. Here also get 9,000 cases. I mean, they're, not a day, they're trying to get people, take this inoculation, take this vaccine, hopefully, as quickly as possible, get another 1 million people, what do you call it? Vaccinated, and all that. But what, we have 2 different, I don't know if they're 2 different, but definite mutations, one from England, one from South Africa, etc. People getting infected at a very high rate, an extremely high rate, right? Nobody wants to get it. Nobody wants to get it. Nobody wants to be in lockdown, right, as well. So you have an obligation to protect others, because that's why you're wearing the mask in the first place. 70% is protecting someone else, etc. But you yourself don't want to get it, because what does God show over here? God shows that even a person can be totally healthy. There are stories about, healthy Orthodox Jews, 28, 30, 32, no other issues. 2 days they were dead. Oh. So there are 2 things going on, right? One is, or maybe it's all one thing, And that is that or maybe two things. When it's your time to go, it doesn't really matter. It could be by a cold, it could be, get hit by a bus, any number of things. And the second thing is to show that even if a person is perfectly healthy and 99.9 times, right, that if this happens and you get this virus, you're not going to die, right? You may have other other issues. They may be lingering issues, which some people are having now, even after they overcome it, or someone's got back problems now because of it, whatever. But in general, what's God showing you? God's showing you that you don't want to get it, right? You definitely do not want to get it, even if 99.9% of the time, and it's a really small percentage that people who are healthy get it, could have a really negative effect. You don't want to take that chance, right? That's not 1 in 1,000, right? That's much higher. Much is like 1 in a million, right? Or even higher than that. It's a very, very, very tiny percentage. And it's not, if it be 1 in 1,000, that's already considered a danger. But we're not talking 1 in 1,000, right? So the point is, we have an obligation to be careful. We have an obligation to watch ourselves. And therefore, we watch ourselves. Hopefully, we don't get infected and we don't affect others. Now, the only other issue over here, as our time winds down, is that sometimes someone could have it. They don't show any symptoms.
I'm just asking a question, Rabbi, online. Yeah. We have one lady watching named Alexandra. She had it twice. She's had COVID twice. And I asked that question exactly. Do you know if you transmitted it to anyone along the way? I'm waiting to hear an answer back, because, it's real important how we.
Well, even if you get the vaccine, you could. There are people that have gotten it again, right? Even after the vaccine, or there were people that didn't get it and got it with the vaccine. After they had the vaccine, they didn't have enough antibodies, right? So they say it takes at least a few weeks for the antibodies to set in, but it could be they already had it or was coming, and the antibodies weren't strong enough to fight against it, right? Definitely possible, right? I do know there was a question somebody asked that they said they infected their father. They had it. Their father got it and died. They said, how do you do repentance?
This lady's
for that?
saying her father got it from her, but they were able to get some specific vitamins in large doses, and he got through it. Yeah, go on, Rabbi.
Oh, that's a scary thing. So
sure.
So my one of my married daughters were just here earlier, and she was finally out of isolation, and so it's funny. So when I saw, I was like, So anyway, so that was she's like, not funny. So whatever, everything should go well, for everyone. But again, we have an obligation to guard ourselves, yes, right? This is putting our best foot forward. There will be anti-vaxxers out there who say you shouldn't do it and whatever. We've already spoken about it, but we definitely see right now, we're in an unbelievably contagious stage. Right? There's no question about it. Here in Israel, they're saying we don't want to go to a third lockdown. Right? If they get enough people evacuated, they want 70%. So about 7 million Jews here, they want about 5 million Jews, right, to be vaccinated. So that you're talking probably gonna at least, Passover is like in 10 weeks. I don't know if they're gonna vaccinate another 3 million people by then, 3.5 million people. We'll see. But they want to get to a certain level where most people vaccinated go back to normal. Right. And, most people vaccinated. Good. So, but we're in a time now. I think it's clear. It's happening in different places. It's happening in the States, happening here. It's happening, in other places where it's so unbelievably contagious. How in the world can you take any chances? Right. And people say they can't tell me what to do. I have right to do what I want. Okay. But, this is what medicine is showing here. This is what's going on.
They can't be an animal.
There are people dying.
Don't act like an animal, folks. Yeah.
In the States, you got thousands of people dying a day.
Yeah.
You haven't had this for months. But the irony is you only have, like, as of last week, they had 20 million doses, and only 5 million people have got it. I heard that the websites broke down, other things
Rabbi.
broke down, and you'll never guess in a million years who they blame it on. Not me, not you.
Trump.
But
They must be blaming Trump. It's got to be Trump's fault.
Right.
You know, Rabbi, we're hearing up here in Canada, we're hearing even of misappropriation of some, well, hey, we got so many doses to hand out during the day. Oh, there was 18 left. So I called all my family members down quickly and got them by the guy who's the administrator of the hospital. Or he's already had his two. Now his wife got her two. And, and then so you get the nepotistic favoritism going on. And
so I'll tell you a funny story here. Things have to be at a certain temperature, right? They have to be extremely cold, right?
Yeah,
so they know at the end of the day, they can't put these things back in the freezer, right? Once they're already exposed, right? So someone told me, they said, you can call up the health clinic and say, how many do you have left? Whatever, like at the end of the day, and then you can run and get it. You don't have to wait in line, right? Because you can find out and do that, but whatever. It's I hear you.
It's the case. It's the honest case, but you just see the accusers, though. They want to jump down on the hospital guy for looking after it. But what's he going to do? He can't let the 9 or 10 or 18, spoil. I mean, we're sending them out to rural communities here in northern Canada, right? I mean, we got some really tiny, small communities. We sent them Moderna vaccine and stuff like that, but we're not getting it out there as fast as you folks in Israel. Nobody else on the planet is, and I think that we really need to step that up. But Rabbi, I need to begin to wind this down. You want to give us a quick summary?
Somebody just pointed out, one second. Somebody just pointed out on the chat that the father gave it to them, not the other way around. They didn't give it to the father gave it to them. So okay, but thank God nothing happened to the either way. They said. They only had a headache from it, so that's good.
That was the second time around. I think
thank God for that. But we are winding down, so we're gonna be in this mission for a while.
Now, Rabbi, I must say, next week is my weekend on emergency call, so I have to sadly have to scratch next weekend. 2 weeks, Hashem willing, being a property manager, I may have some people wanting to sign under their properties, and I'm really arguing with them. I says, there's no way I'm taking 2 weekends off a month from broadcasting. And if I can't get tenants that are vacating or moving in to work around my schedule, I may just, somebody said to me, well, your job. I said, are you kidding me? This is charity work. I'm trying to help the community. I don't want to look at it in the wrong light, but the reality is, I'm not giving up on these broadcasts. You spend so much time to do it. And like you even said today, sir, it's not your obligation to put it out there. I'm asking, and I'm thankful that you're sharing. Pirkei Avos, this is a beautiful class. There's so much depth here. And, you've taught me a lot today, and I think you sorted a couple marbles that were rolling around up here.
I hope they don't find anything in there, by the way.
All right, so we're going to sign out, folks. We're not going to be on next week because I'm not allowed to broadcast next week. I'm on emergency call, but Hashem willing, we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we hope you'll join us, and I want to thank all of you. Rabbi Coffman, any last words?
Any last words? No, I think we're good. I think, we just have to, we have to keep in mind that we can't be out for ourselves, right? We have to guard ourselves. That, that's very true. And, we have to want to, as we mentioned, be part of the community, be out there helping others, consoling others, because when we really need it, they'll help us out as well.
I think you brought that out beautifully today. I hope people get the message. So till next time, folks, we're going to sign off. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.